Captain Tom Walker stood at the viewport of his merchant ship, Prudence, watching the busy lanes of Centauri Station with careful eyes. His weathered hands moved across the safety console, running yet another system check. The ship's computer beeped softly, confirming all backup systems were working perfectly. Another day, another check. He muttered to himself, a small smile playing on his lips. The smile grew wider as he spotted a massive warship from the warrior clans docking without proper safety buffers. They always rushed everything, those warriors. A voice crackled over the station's public channel. Human vessel Prudence, your docking time is extended by 30 minutes due to your extensive safety protocols. The station controller couldn't hide the mockery in their voice. Acknowledged control. Better safe than sorry, Tom replied calmly. He was used to this by now. Humans had been part of the galactic community for 50 years, and they still got laughed at for their careful nature. In the loading bay below, his crew worked methodically. Each cargo container was scanned 3 times, each seal checked twice. Other species crews rushed around them, moving cargo at dangerous speeds, their foremen shouting about efficiency and speed records. Lisa, his first officer, appeared at his side. Captain, the warriors are making fun of our safety gear again. She adjusted her reinforced work suit, another piece of equipment that made other species laugh. They preferred to work with minimal protection, proud of their natural toughness. Let them laugh, Tom said. I'd rather look silly than lose a crew member. He remembered the accident from last week. A warrior clan loader had dropped 3 stories when their magnetic boots failed. No backup systems, no safety nets. The warrior had survived, called it a badge of honor, but was now missing 2 limbs. The station shuddered slightly. Tom immediately pulled up his diagnostic screens, while other ships ignored the tremor. His systems showed a minor power fluctuation in the station's 3rd reactor. Within moments, the Prudence's computers had recorded the data and sent it to both the ship's log and station control. Typical human behavior. A deep voice boomed from the doorway. Commander Brock of the warrior clan stood there, his massive frame filling the entrance. Always checking, always worrying. When do you find time to live, little human? Tom turned calmly. Living is exactly why we check, Commander. Dead heroes save no one. Brock laughed, the sound like rolling thunder. In my culture, we say, face danger with open arms, and glory will embrace you back. In our culture, Tom replied, we say, look before you leap. Different approaches, Commander. A commotion from the lower decks drew their attention. A cargo loader from another merchant species had malfunctioned, sending boxes tumbling. While others watched, Tom's crew was already moving. They had trained for this. Backup loading systems activated, emergency containment fields sprang up, and within minutes, the situation was under control. Excessive, Brock commented, shaking his head. All those backup systems, all that extra weight and cost. It slows you down. Tom watched as his crew efficiently reorganized the fallen cargo. Speed isn't everything, Commander. We humans learned that lesson the hard way back on Earth. Every safety protocol we have was written in blood. Every backup system exists because someone died without it. The station shuddered again, stronger this time. While other ships' crews barely noticed, Tom's team was already running diagnostics. The Prudence's sensors picked up another power fluctuation, bigger than the last. Station control, Tom called over the common channel. We're detecting increasing instability in your 3rd reactor. Recommend immediate diagnostic. Noted, Prudence, came the dismissive reply. Our systems show everything within acceptable parameters. Your human sensors must be oversensitive. As usual. Tom shared a knowing look with Lisa. Without a word, she began the procedure they drilled countless times, a subtle repositioning of the Prudence, moving it to a safer distance from the reactor section, while maintaining the appearance of normal docking procedures. Always preparing for the worst, Brock observed with a mixture of amusement and contempt. Tom nodded, his eyes still on his screens. We find it's better to have precautions and not need them. than to need them and not have them. Little did any of them know, those human precautions would soon prove more valuable than any amount of warrior courage. 3 weeks after the incident at Centauri Station, Captain Tom Walker sat in the Prudence's command room, studying the latest reports. His eyes moved carefully over each line of data, a habit that had earned humans their reputation for being slow and overly careful. The screen showed a pattern that made his skin crawl. Shipping routes in the outer sectors were reporting strange energy readings. Most ships ignored them. They were tiny changes, barely noticeable unless you were looking for them. But Tom had been watching, and he had been recording. "Lisa," he called to his first officer, "take a look at this." He pointed to a series of numbers on his screen. "Notice anything unusual?" Lisa leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "The background radiation. It's increasing. Not by much, but it's steady." She straightened up. "Most ships wouldn't even notice with their basic sensors. Good thing we have the unnecessary advanced scanning equipment everyone makes fun of," Tom said with a slight smile. He pulled up another screen. "And look at these shipping reports." The data showed a disturbing trend. Ships were going slightly off course in certain sectors. The deviations were minimal. Most captains blamed it on faulty equipment or pilot error. But when Tom mapped all these small changes together, they formed a pattern. A loud buzz announced an incoming transmission. The face of Admiral Jones from the Human Defense Fleet appeared on the screen. She looked concerned. "Captain Walker, we've received your reports," she said without greeting. "Other human ships are seeing similar patterns. We're starting emergency preparations." Tom nodded. "The other species? They're calling us paranoid," the Admiral replied with a grimace. "Say we're seeing problems where none exist." The ship's computer beeped, signaling another energy fluctuation in nearby space. This one was stronger than the others. Tom quickly logged it and sent the data to the Admiral. "They're getting stronger," he observed, "and more frequent." Just then, Commander Brock's massive warship passed by the Prudence's viewport. The warrior commander's voice boomed over the common channel. "Still hiding behind your scanners, human. While you check your readings, we patrol with pride." Tom switched to a private channel with the Admiral. "Should we warn them more directly?" "We've tried," she replied. "The Galactic Council call our evidence insufficient and our concerns typical human overcaution. But we're proceeding with our preparations anyway." The Human Defense Fleet was quietly repositioning ships, stockpiling supplies, and updating emergency protocols. Other humans across the galaxy were doing the same. They couldn't help it. It was in their nature to prepare for the worst. "Look at this," Lisa said suddenly, pointing to a new reading. A cargo ship had disappeared in the outer sectors. The other species blamed it on a navigation error, but Tom saw how it lined up perfectly with his pattern of anomalies. "Admiral," he said, "we need to start evacuating human colonies in the outer sectors." "Agreed, but quietly. We don't want to cause a panic, and we don't want more mockery from the Council." As they talked, another ship passed by, an alien luxury liner. Its passengers were visible through the massive viewport, dancing and celebrating. No extra shields, minimal safety systems. Tom shook his head. "Their sensors aren't even activated," Lisa noted. "They'd never see danger coming." "That's what worries me," Tom replied. "They're so used to facing threats head-on, they don't understand the value of detecting them early." The Admiral's face was grim. "Keep gathering data, Captain. Keep preparing. Something's coming, something big. And when it hits, those who laughed at human caution might wish they'd been a little more cowardly themselves." As the Admiral's image faded, Tom looked out at the busy space lanes. Ships of all species moved about their business, none of them noticing the subtle changes in the darkness between the stars. None except the cautious, careful humans. The Prudence's sensors beeped again. Another anomaly, stronger than the last. Tom logged it dutifully, adding one more point to his growing pattern of warning signs. In the back of his mind, A very human instinct whispered that they were running out of time. It began with a flash of light in the outer sectors. The Prudence's enhanced sensors detected it first. A massive surge of energy that made all previous readings look tiny in comparison. Captain Tom Walker watched as his screens lit up with warnings. "All hands to stations," he ordered calmly. His crew responded immediately, each moving to their prepared positions. They had drilled for this countless times, even though they hadn't known exactly what they were drilling for. The ship's communication system crackled with urgent messages. Other vessels were finally seeing what the humans had feared. A massive shape was emerging from the darkness of space, its form seeming to swallow light itself. "By the stars," Lisa whispered, staring at the main screen. The entity was enormous, bigger than any known spacecraft. It pulsed with strange energy that matched the patterns Tom had been tracking for weeks. Commander Brock's voice thundered across the emergency channel. "All warrior ships, battle formations. We will show this invader the might of the warrior clans." A fleet of warships rushed past the Prudence, weapons charging. "Wait," Tom called out. "We need to study it first. We don't know what we're dealing with." But the warriors didn't listen. Their ships opened fire, unleashing their most powerful weapons. The space around the entity lit up with explosive energy. For a moment, everything was bright as a sun. Then came the horror. The entity didn't burn. It didn't explode. Instead, it grew larger, absorbing the energy from the weapons. The pulsing got stronger, and the thing's dark mass expanded. "All ships, cease fire," Tom shouted into the common channel. "It's feeding on the energy. You're making it stronger." But more ships were arriving now. The proud battle fleet of the Crystal Empire, the legendary Sunfire Squadron, the feared ghost ships of the Nebula Lords, all of them launching their strongest attacks. And with each blast, the entity grew larger, stronger, hungrier. "Prudence to all human vessels," Tom broadcast on the human emergency frequency. "Maintain safe distance. Run passive scans only. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." The entity was moving now, heading straight for the nearest space station. The station's defenders fired their weapons, but it only made things worse. The massive shape engulfed the station whole, and all its lights went dark. "Energy readings are off the scale," Lisa reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "It's absorbing all power sources it encounters." Tom watched as the mighty warships of various species tried to fight the thing. Their weapons, which could shatter planets, only fed its growth. Their shields, which could withstand supernovas, meant nothing to a creature that ate energy itself. "Human vessels are such cowards," someone mocked on the common channel, "running away while we fight." But Tom and his fellow human captains weren't running. They were watching, learning. Their sensors recorded every detail of the entity's behavior. They noted how it reacted to different types of energy, how it moved, how it grew. "Look at this," Lisa said, pointing to a new reading. "When it absorbs energy, there's a pattern to how it processes it, like a heartbeat." Tom studied the data. She was right. The entity wasn't just consuming energy randomly. There was a system to it, a rhythm they might be able to understand, if they survived long enough to study it. The Prudence shuddered as another space station exploded nearby, its reactors overloading in a futile attempt to fight back. The entity consumed the explosion, growing even larger. "Keep recording everything," Tom ordered his crew. "Every detail matters." As he watched the proud warships of the galaxy's greatest warriors fall one by one, Tom thought about how many had laughed at humans for being too careful, too cautious, too cowardly. Now that caution might be the only thing standing between civilization and destruction. The entity turned toward the main shipping lanes, its massive form now large enough to swallow entire fleets. In its wake, it left only darkness and dead ships, their energy consumed completely. And still, the human ships watched, and waited, and learned. Sometimes, Tom knew, The bravest thing you could do was to be patient. 3 days after the entity's appearance, Captain Tom Walker stood in the Prudence's observation room, watching the rescue operations. The scene before him was grim. Hundreds of dead ships floated in space, their power completely drained. The mighty fleets that had rushed in to fight were now nothing but cold metal shells. "Rescue pod approaching, Captain," Lisa reported. "It's from Commander Brock's flagship." Tom turned to the docking bay screens. The pod looked badly damaged, its power almost gone. The Prudence's rescue teams moved quickly, using their backup manual systems to bring it in. They had drilled this procedure many times, though others had called it a waste of time. Now those manual backups were saving lives. The pod's door opened. Commander Brock stumbled out, his massive frame supported by 2 of his warriors. The once proud commander looked haunted. "Captain Walker," he said, his booming voice now barely a whisper. "Your ships, they still have power." "How?" Tom led them to the medical bay, where his crew had prepared for survivors. "We run on minimal power," he explained. "Multiple small reactors instead of one big one. The entity seems to ignore ships that don't put out strong energy signatures." "The mighty warrior fleet," Brock said, shaking his head. 1,000 ships, our strongest weapons, all gone. The Crystal Empire's capital ships, the Ghost Fleet, all destroyed. On the main screen, reports kept coming in. The entity had grown enormous, feeding on the energy of every major power source it encountered. Space stations fell dark one by one. Colonies lost power and froze. The proud civilizations that had mocked human caution were now paying a terrible price. "Your people," Brock said suddenly. "They evacuated their outer colonies weeks ago. You knew something was coming." "We suspected," Tom corrected. "We saw the signs, but nobody would listen. They called us cowards for wanting to study the threat first." Lisa appeared with a new report. "Captain, the human colonies are holding. Our distributed power systems and backup generators are too small to attract the entity, and the evacuation ships all made it to safe zones." A distress call came in from the Galactic Council station. Their main reactor was failing, and the entity was approaching. The station's leaders, who had dismissed human warnings as paranoia, were now begging for help. "All human ships in range," Tom broadcast. "Prepare for rescue operations. Manual systems only, minimal power usage." The Prudence and other human vessels moved carefully toward the station. Their crews worked with practiced efficiency, using mechanical systems and low-power equipment to evacuate the station's personnel. Years of drilling these unnecessary procedures were finally paying off. "I don't understand," one of the rescued council members said, watching the human ships work. "Your vessels are so much smaller, weaker than our warships. Why hasn't the entity destroyed you?" "Because we never tried to be the strongest," Tom explained. "We focused on being careful, on having backups, on spreading out our resources. You built giant power cores to show your strength. We built small, efficient systems and manual backups because we feared failure." Through the viewport, they watched as the entity consumed the council station. Its massive form had grown to frighten even the bravest warriors. But the human ships continued their work, moving carefully through space, rescuing survivors, gathering data. "The humans," Brock said quietly to his warriors. "All this time we laughed at their caution, called them cowards for checking their systems 3 times, for having backup after backup. But look who survives now. Look who still has power, still has ships." Tom's screen showed more distress calls coming in, more stations falling dark, more proud empires facing the consequences of their reckless actions. But the human fleet remained operational, their careful preparation and cowardly ways now the only hope for many. As the Prudence moved to answer another distress call, Tom thought about how quickly things had changed. Just days ago, humans were mocked for their cautious nature. Now that same nature might be all that stood between the galaxy and complete darkness. While other species mourned their losses, the crew of the Prudence worked tirelessly. For 5 days straight, They studied every piece of data they had collected. Captain Tom Walker hadn't slept much, his eyes fixed on the patterns in the entity's behavior. "Look at this again," he said to Lisa, pointing to a sequence of energy readings. "Every time it absorbs power, there's a rhythm to it, like a pulse." Lisa nodded, touching the screen to highlight a particular pattern. And here, when it tried to absorb energy from that damaged reactor, something was different. Tom leaned closer. The damaged reactor had been leaking radiation in an unusual way. For a brief moment, the entity had actually pulled back from it. Most people had missed this detail, too busy watching the bigger explosions. But the humans, with their careful observations, had seen it. "Get me Admiral Jones," Tom ordered. Within moments, the Admiral's face appeared on screen. "Captain Walker," she said, "please tell me you have something." Tom shared his screen with her. "The entity isn't just absorbing energy. It's processing it in a specific way. And when that way gets disrupted," he played the footage of the damaged reactor. The Admiral's eyes widened. "It pulled back. It actually retreated." "Yes," Tom said. "And we've been testing different energy patterns. Very small ones, too weak to feed it, but strong enough to observe its reactions." He showed her more data. The human ships hadn't been hiding. They'd been experimenting. While other species tried to fight with brute force, humans had been carefully testing the entity's responses to different types of energy. Commander Brock, who had been listening from his recovery bed, spoke up. "You mean while we were throwing our strongest weapons at it?" "We were learning how it thinks," Lisa finished, "how it processes energy. And we found something it can't handle." Tom brought up a new display. "If we modulate our energy emissions in exactly the opposite pattern to its absorption rhythm, it creates a disruption. The entity can't process it. It's like trying to drink water and blow bubbles at the same time." The Admiral studied the data carefully, a very human response that had once been mocked by others. "Can we use this?" "We already are," Tom said. "The human fleet has been quietly refitting our ships with energy modulators. We've been testing them on a small scale, making sure they work before we tried anything big." "Always so careful," Brock said, but this time there was respect in his voice, not mockery. A call came in from another human ship. The caution. "Captain Walker, modulator test successful. The entity actively avoided our ship when we activated the system." More reports followed. All across human space, ships and stations had been preparing this defense. They hadn't rushed in with untested weapons. They had taken their time, made sure everything worked properly, planned for failure. "How long until the entire human fleet is ready?" the Admiral asked. 2 more days, Tom replied. "We need to test everything 3 times, make sure all the backup systems are in place." "Still running triple checks even now?" Brock asked. Tom nodded. "Especially now. We can't afford mistakes. One overloaded modulator could feed the entity instead of repelling it." The Admiral made her decision. "Do it right, Captain. Do it carefully. We've seen what happens when people rush in unprepared." Through the viewport, they could see the entity in the distance, its massive form still growing as it fed on the remnants of fallen civilizations. But now, for the first time, they had a real way to fight it. "Humans," Brock said thoughtfully, watching their methodical preparations. "You never fought it at all, did you? You just watched, and learned, and planned. And now you have the answer that all our courage and strength couldn't find." Tom looked at his crew, each one carefully checking and rechecking their systems. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to step back and understand it first. That's not cowardice, it's wisdom. The Prudence's new modulator hummed quietly, its energy pattern causing the entity to keep its distance. Soon, every human ship would have the same protection. And then, perhaps, they could teach the rest of the galaxy a valuable lesson about the difference between caution and fear. The command room of the Prudence had changed. Where Captain Tom Walker once stood alone checking his systems, now representatives from 6 different species crowded around him. They watched as he explained the human battle plan. though battle wasn't quite the right word. We don't fight the entity directly, Tom explained, pointing to the display. Instead, we create a network of energy modulators, each one tuned to disrupt its feeding pattern. Like building a fence, piece by piece. Commander Brock, now recovered from his injuries, nodded slowly. And you're sure this will work? We've tested it 30 times, Lisa answered. First with small ships, then with stations. The entity can't process the modulated energy. It has to move away or risk disrupting its own energy patterns. The warrior clan ships, once proud battlecruisers, had been refitted with human-design modulators. Their massive power cores were now running at minimal levels, carefully controlled. It was a strange sight, warriors learning to be cautious. All ships, report status, Tom called over the command channel. One by one, the fleet checked in. Each ship had triple redundancy on their modulators, backup power systems, and emergency protocols, all standard human practices that were now being adopted by everyone. Remember, Tom said to the gathered commanders, if anything goes wrong, don't try to be heroes. Fall back to your designated safe points. We have backup plans for our backup plans. Some of the alien commanders chuckled at this very human approach, but there was no mockery in their laughter now. They had learned the hard way that courage alone wasn't enough. The entity loomed in the distance, its massive form still growing from its latest feast of energy. But this time, they were ready for it. First line, begin deployment, Tom ordered. A group of ships moved forward, their modulators humming in perfect sync. The entity tried to approach them, but pulled back, unable to feed on their disrupted energy patterns. Second line, move into position, Lisa called. Another group of ships advanced, creating another layer of modulated energy. Slowly, carefully, they were building a cage of energy the entity couldn't approach. By the stars, one of the alien commanders whispered, it's actually working. Step by step, ship by ship, they expanded their network. When one modulator showed signs of strain, its backup kicked in immediately. When a power core started to fluctuate, the ship withdrew and another took its place. Everything was coordinated, planned, careful. Look how they move, Brock said to his warriors. No wasted action. No glorious charges, just steady, careful progress. The entity tried to break through their lines, searching for gaps or weaknesses. But the humans had planned for this. Reserve ships moved to reinforce any point that showed strain. Backup systems kicked in before primary ones could fail. Every movement was calculated and tested. The entity's changing course, Lisa reported. It's trying to retreat. All ships maintain formation, Tom ordered. Don't rush to close the trap. Slow and steady. They had learned that the entity could move faster than their ships when it wanted to. But they hadn't built their strategy around speed. Instead, they used patience and positioning to slowly restrict its movement options. Hour by hour, the energy net grew tighter. The entity found itself with fewer places to go, its massive form trapped by a web of carefully modulated energy fields. Not through force or speed, but through careful planning and coordination. I never thought I'd see this, one of the alien commanders said. The mighty fleets of the galaxy, following human safety protocols, triple-checking everything, moving so cautiously. Tom smiled. Being careful doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes the patient path is the strongest one. The entity made another attempt to break free, but found itself blocked by layers of redundant energy fields. The human approach, slow, methodical, and careful, was proving more effective than all the mighty weapons that had failed before. Containment at 70%, Lisa reported. All systems functioning within safe parameters. The galaxy was learning a new way of fighting. Not with courage and force, but with patience and planning. And leading them all was the species they had once mocked as cowards. 1 month after the entity's appearance, the Galactic Council met in their temporary chambers aboard the human station Hope. The old council station lay dark and empty, a reminder of how pride had nearly doomed them all. But here, surrounded by human safety systems and backup generators, they were planning the future. Captain Tom Walker stood at the podium, facing representatives from every spacefaring species. Even now, he took a moment to check his notes one last time, a habit that no one mocked anymore. "The entity has been successfully contained," he reported. "Our energy modulation field holds it in a stable pattern. We've built 7 layers of backup systems around the containment zone, and we monitor it constantly." Commander Brock, now wearing the simple uniform of the reformed warrior clans, spoke up. "And you're sure we shouldn't just try to destroy it?" "We've studied it carefully," Tom replied. "The entity isn't evil. It's just following its nature. Destroying it might release all the energy it's absorbed, which could be catastrophic. Containment is safer." The council members nodded. After recent events, safer had become their favorite word. "The human approach has proven its worth," the council leader announced. "Therefore, we are implementing new guidelines for all spacefaring civilizations. All ships must now have triple redundant safety systems. All crews must run regular drills. All operations must include backup plans." Lisa, standing beside Tom, couldn't help but smile. These were all things humans had been doing for years, while others laughed at them. "Furthermore," the leader continued, "we are establishing a new division of the Council, the Department of Preparation and Safety. Captain Walker, we ask you to lead it." Tom looked surprised. "Me? You saw the signs when others ignored them. You studied the threat while others rushed to fight it. You found a solution through patience and observation. Who better?" The gathered representatives applauded. Even the proudest warrior races had learned to value the human way of doing things. "Times have changed," Brock said, standing up. "My people once lived by the saying, 'Glory to the brave.' Now we say, 'Wisdom before warfare.' We learned this from humans." Other representatives shared similar stories. The Crystal Empire had replaced their massive power cores with distributed systems like human ships used. The Ghost Fleet now ran triple checks before every jump. Everyone had learned that being careful wasn't the same as being afraid. "But what about progress?" one member asked. "Won't all these safety measures slow us down?" "Better slow than sorry," Tom replied, using an old human saying that was becoming popular across the galaxy. "We'll still move forward. We'll still explore and grow. We'll just do it carefully, with proper preparation." The council session ended with a new understanding. The species that others had called cowards had saved them all, not through bravery or strength, but through caution and planning. Later, back on the Prudence, Tom looked out at the containment field holding the entity. The massive dark shape floated peacefully now, surrounded by layers of carefully modulated energy fields. "Quite a change," Lisa said, joining him. "Remember when they used to laugh at us for taking too long to dock?" Tom smiled. "Now they wait patiently while everyone runs their safety checks." Times really have changed. Through the viewport, they could see ships from different species moving carefully through space. Each one now carried human-designed safety systems. Each crew now followed human-style protocols. The galaxy had learned that true strength often looked like caution. "Captain," a young crew member called out, "preliminary readings show a small fluctuation in the containment field." "Begin standard diagnostic procedure," Tom ordered. "Check all backup systems. No need to rush." As his crew moved with practiced efficiency, Tom thought about how far they'd come. The humans had never been cowards. They had simply understood something that the rest of the galaxy had needed to learn. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to take your time and be careful. The Prudence's systems hummed softly, each backup and safety measure working perfectly. In the distance, the entity remained safely contained, a reminder to all that wisdom and caution had succeeded where courage and force had failed.